So friends, let us welcome with open arms Lee Finke as she comes up and tells her story for us. Yeah, you can come too.
Hello. Can you hear me okay? Volume is good. In the fall of 2018, I told a boy that I was seeing that the constitutional right to an abortion in the United States was already gone. It was just a matter of time, I said, but Roe was already dead. He didn't believe me. He said I sounded like a crazy, paranoid person. I hope you're right, I said, but I bet you've never read the work of Francis Schaeffer. He admitted that he had not. I'm not mentioning this prediction with any pride or joy. Friday's ruling was one of the darkest days in the nation since I was born 41 years ago. There's no pleasure in this, I told you so. Let it stand as a reminder instead that many would rather not hear uncomfortable truths if such truths complicate an otherwise simple worldview. If the Supreme Court ruling changes anything for the better, perhaps more people will listen to those they once thought crazy. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today on Pride Sunday. As Reverend Alexander said, this is a day that commemorates the first Pride at Stonewall. We heard the refrain about how the first Pride was a riot, one started by trans women of color, no less. It's true that trans women were at the front on Stonewall, and it points to a fact that we cannot separate the movement for queer liberation from the street action of trans people. Stonewall was not the first time trans people rioted. Trans people rioted at Compton Cafeteria in San Francisco in 1965. Before that, trans people rioted at Cooper Donuts in Los Angeles in 1959. And we rioted before that and before that too. This street action goes all the way back to the eunuchs by choice that Jesus spoke of, and who I am certain gathered on the street corners of their day to share their joy and cast their fabulous shadow in the direction of the oppressors of their time. I am honored to have a chance to be here in the modern Hall of Power, speaking out for my community as we are once again facing a tide of violence and oppression. My name is Lee Finke, and it wasn't always. I was born in Delano, Minnesota. I grew up in Maple Grove, 20-odd miles west of here. I was a kid who, for most of my childhood, was relatively normal on the outside and was fairly tormented on the inside. It's a much longer tale than we have time to tell here today, but suffice to say that when I was 14 years old, I started to examine what might make me a little bit tormented. When I was 15 years old, in 1996, I decided that I was a gay boy. And I started hatching a plan to tell my parents. I had never knowingly met a gay person in my life at the time. And the idea that I might tell my father that I was gay was so terrifying that I decided, in fact, I was not gay. And a few weeks before my 16th birthday, I instead became a born-again evangelical Christian. Did you know that 78% of youth who are queer and not out to their parents hear negative remarks about queer people from their parents? A full 50% of youth who are out to their parents continue to hear negative remarks about queer people. Young people hear everything. And so I became a Christian. Christianity became my closet, and I buried myself deep, deep inside. It carried me through the rest of high school. It took me to Bethel College, just up Snelling Avenue. It would be 20 years before I would find my way out. Coming out was a brutal process for me. It spiraled into a year-long depressive episode and a drinking problem. There was also a divorce, a terrible basement apartment, darkness settled in that left very few avenues out. Luckily, I had someone there who loved me enough to say, "Go to the doctor right now," first thing in the morning. And the next day I did. And I got medication, and I lived. And I started transition, and I found sobriety, and finally, I found the liberating light of queer joy. For the past several years, I have been living as the best possible version of me. Lucky and grateful that I survived when for a while it did not seem possible. Now I have survived long enough to live a life surrounded by people who love me. I have done meaningful work as a writer and filmmaker, an activist at the ACLU now, and as a candidate for office. I get emotional whenever I talk like this. I can't believe that I get to live this life. I can't believe how lucky I am. I'm also terrified. Not for myself. I have clawed my way out of the darkness. I'm terrified for every young queer person in America and their families and their friends. And for the future of my community. It has always been true that this is a dangerous world for trans people. And I'm here to tell you it's getting worse. Every year since the election of the former president, we have seen an increase in violence against my community. The data on violence against trans people, and specifically against Black trans people in America, is horrifying. Every year since 2018 has set a new record for the murder of trans people in America. 2018 was also the first year that the GLAAD Accelerating Acceptance Report found a decrease in acceptance for LGBTQ people. That has continued every year across all ages and all demographics. We are not only being rejected by aging people, by people in the South, or by rural people who are conservatives. If you think that this problem is not local, then you're not talking to the queer people in your life, or you just don't have any. It was 9 a.m. on a Wednesday in 2019 in the spring when I was assaulted on the Green Line train. My attacker followed me off the train onto the platform at the Government Plaza station, where he assaulted me. No one stepped in, no one helped, no one checked in on me afterwards. It was just something that happened to me, something of very little concern to the world around me. I want to ask you what you would have done if you'd been on that train. Literally ask yourself, if you saw me, cute in my summer dress, being assaulted, first verbally and then physically, would that have moved you to action? There were many people on that train, some in suits going to work in their downtown offices. It was two men who assaulted me, and I don't know why, but I know why no one helped me. It is easy when you are transgender, when you travel through the country as a trans woman, to know why strangers do not come to your aid. If you don't know why, then you're not talking to the queer people in your life, or you just don't have any. So let me tell you why. Nobody stepped forward to help me in that moment because my life wasn't valuable enough to them. In the risk analysis, the potential for harm, or at least inconvenience, that might come from getting involved in a stranger's assault is very high. But what is the benefit? If you help a trans person live a day, what is the benefit? She can be assaulted again. She could be murdered the next day. You're probably thinking, she's not talking about me. I would have helped. And I hope that's true. But the data and the history doesn't incline The data and the history doesn't indicate that it is. Last Christmas, I was talking to a doctor I know, and she asked me about the torrent of anti-trans legislation the country was seeing. She asked me where it was all heading. I told her that in 5 years, transition healthcare in America for youth will be banned by the Supreme Court. I told her that a few years after that, transition healthcare will be banned for everyone by the Supreme Court. She didn't believe me. This remains a very unpopular opinion. People cringe when they hear it. When I accepted this invitation, I planned to talk to you about trans rights and advocacy work and the work that I love that I have been able to do with LGBTQ young people, especially LGBTQ youth and Christian families. I love that work so much. It has defined the last several years of my life. I've dedicated my life to it, and it would have felt good for all of us, I think, to have this conversation about how we can better help and protect trans kids. But I just don't think there's time right now for trans people to make speeches intended to make other people feel good. The world is changing too fast, and in the midst of that change is a movement to make trans people illegal in this country, and they are winning. So I'm here to tell you that there will be more riots. We remember Stonewall as a riot, and we know now that it was necessary. The next riots will be necessary too. And you will learn the names of brave trans people taking to the streets to demand dignity and life and love and health care and peace. And it will not be granted to us anytime soon. We will keep fighting. I hope you will keep fighting. I hope that you will riot alongside of us. Happy Pride. Thank you.